Welcome to episode 165 of Girl Take the Lead, where each week we explore womanhood and leadership. And I'm your host, Yo Canny. Today, Claire Lachance, President and CEO of ReSurge International, a pioneering nonprofit organization dedicated to expanding access to life changing reconstructive surgery in low income countries, joins us to talk about ReSurge's programs and the positive impact they're making in global communities with life transforming care. I've been a supporter of ReSurge for over 5 years, love their mission, capacity building programs, and funding for direct patient care, giving surgeons in low income regions the tools they need. Did you know that 5 billion people do not have access to safe, timely, and affordable surgical care worldwide? And every 2 seconds, someone dies from a surgically preventable disease? Claire not only tells us about ReSurge, but also shares her insights about leadership, which is very cool. Enjoy the listen. Here you go. Well, hi, Claire. Welcome to Girl Take the Lead. It's so exciting to have you with us.
Gosh, thank you, Yo.
And the organization, ReSurge International has my heart. I've
Mm,
just love and admire that organization so much. So can't wait to tell our listeners about it and put the spotlight on you guys and your
Thank you.
efforts. So why don't we begin first by if you would give them a little bit about your background
Sure.
and why you got to ReSurge. You're our chief executive
Mm.
officer, and we love you. So
Oh gosh,
go for it.
thank you, Yo. Thank you, that, and thank you for the opportunity to do this podcast together. I'm honored and looking forward to the conversation, and hopefully being of some source of information and inspiration to all the listeners.
Mhm.
And my name is Claire Lachance. As you said, I'm the president and chief executive officer of ReSurge International. I'm someone who actually had a more corporate start to my career with classic training in finance at MetLife in New York. And I went to Harvard Business School after 4 years at MetLife, continued corporate with AT&T Pacific Bell here in California for 2 years. And then I kind of had an epiphany moment in that job at AT&T where I felt kind of asked myself, what am I doing? Like, what am I working on? And even though I had the more MBA type training, I actually felt, of all things, it really could be and should be applied in the nonprofit world. And I was serving as the board chair of a women's nonprofit in San Francisco, the Women's Building at the time. And I said, could I do this as my career? And so I hung up my shingle, and for over 15 years, I had a strategic planning consulting practice specifically for nonprofits in California. And it was incredible. I worked a lot in social services, education, immigration, primarily worked with large community foundations to launch initiatives. It was awesome. And then one day, and my own interest area, and I say this for people listening or watching this, I was, I had gone to a conference in an area of great personal interest of mine, which is in consciousness research, mind matter and the mind matter interaction, which it was with the Institute of Noetic Sciences, or IONS, as many know it. And I went as just a regular person, like going as a member, and I would go to this conference. And I was so taken by the work, I decided to volunteer my time as a consultant to them, ended up being asked to be on the board. Within a few months, I was the board chair. And then about a year later was asked if I'd consider becoming the CEO. And I said, what? This is not on my plan. But it was almost like the same epiphany moment that had happened to me at Pacific Bell. I said, look, if I'm consulting to nonprofits, I should probably sit in the CEO seat, right?
Mhm.
And so I said yes. And it was this amazing 6 years with IONS, really leading an organizational a transformational moment for them, on many, many levels, and loved it, loved the work, still love the work, but then started to feel called to more international service, direct
Mhm,
service. And
mhm.
the reason why, when a recruiter reached out to me about ReSurge International, I was immediately called to pay a close attention because ReSurge International is all about life changing reconstructive surgery.
Mhm.
And I had had life changing surgery earlier in my life. It was for my eyes. It
Mhm.
was not reconstructive, it was vision. And I was born with a condition, congenital cataracts, that I inherited from my mother, who had the same thing. We had both become legally blind by about first grade in school. And I had to live with the full blown cataract blindness until right before junior year of high school. So that was a long time. It was 10 years, and it could have been much worse. My mother, they made her wait till she was in her 30s. But the point is, I was able to have surgery then on one of my eyes. That one eye surgery completely, changed a lot of the opportunities out there for me, because I was able to be someone who could function, drive,
Mhm.
travel. I'm not saying if you're vision impaired you can't, but it sure opened up a world for me just to be able to see bright colors, to even do this broadcast right now, seeing you. And when the call came from ReSurge, I said, I think
Yeah.
that's what I need to do, is to bring transformational surgery to people in low income countries as a bit of almost like a bracketing of my own life experience. So I know, a long answer, but I it's all about saying yes to opportunities that maybe you weren't quite planning on.
Right. Right. And I also
Yes.
think it sounds like you were listening to your heart along the way too, and your passion,
Yes.
which always I think is a good strategy in our career development.
Yeah, you'll hear, I think maybe we can talk more about it later, but I'm a big student of intuition,
Mhm.
consciousness, listening to heart, your somatics in your body, listening to what's coming in, however that means to a person.
Yeah.
And it was in each of those cases one of those moments. And you can't say no to those.
Yeah. You
It's
got to
hard.
run with them.
Yes.
So recently, Research International was acknowledged by the United Nations Commission on the Status of Women by being a panel member. So, congratulations to the organization. But I think it'd be great for our listeners to hear a little bit
Oh
about
my
maybe
gosh.
what that panel was like and what are some things that went on there.
Oh, thanks, you. It was a very special moment. We think it was the first time in ReSurge International's history. Organization's over 50 years old, but we're pretty confident it was the first time to have that kind of recognition. And what that was we had applied recently. ReSurge, and this is in our program area, led by our chief program officer Natalie Myers, had published an article on the disparate impact of burns on women and girls in low and middle income countries, and which I can talk about a little bit more, because oftentimes in developed countries like the United States, a lot of burns in adults in particular are men. They're in
Mhm.
due to the nature of certain type of jobs. Well, in low and middle income countries, it's often women and girls, due greatly in part to the open cooking fires that are still used in many countries, and sadly, violence against women, including acid burns. I say that because what happened with the panel is we applied to present this article, this research, to as part of the Commission on the Status of Women, which is an annual convening at the United Nations. And we applied for it. We said we'd like to have a panel. We were accepted, and not only were we accepted, we were one of the few that didn't have to combine the topics with another. A lot of a lot of organizations had to kind of figure out a way to combine their two topics. They allowed us to present only on that topic, and we put together an incredible panel. And on that panel, in addition to our chief program officer, was a woman, Natalia Ponce de Leon from Colombia, who is very well known in that country and is a survivor of an acid burn, um, a
Mm,
terrible incident where a disgruntled boyfriend attacked her, had her attacked with the acid,
mm,
and she's undergone over 40 surgeries.
wow.
And she is a beautiful person in powerful ways. She was one of the examples of what occurs in the countries, that we serve. And what we did is it's raising awareness of the issue of burns and the disparate impact. And we could probably have a whole session just about that. But what was so exciting is that the panel itself, it brought attention to the issue, and it brought attention to our broader work, which is around the whole full scope of reconstructive, which
Mhm,
is really all about returning the normal functionality of your body after a traumatic accident, a congenital condition, cancer, and so forth. It's our medical officer, Dr. Jim Chang, who is the head of plastic surgery at Stanford. He loves to say from top to toe.
mm,
So it could be missing digits, fingers, toes. About half of our cases are burn contractures. In many of the countries, there is no treatment after a burn.
mhm,
There's no surgical ability to do the acute care. So what happens is often the scarring creates a contracture, which locks in your hands, locks in your arms. And all it takes, and I shouldn't say all it takes, but there are surgical procedures we all would take for granted to call unlock the contracture,
right.
and that restores functioning. So at the UN, we were able to talk with other nonprofits working to expand, be able to partner together and say, how could we provide broaden, because we also do cleft lip and palate, but how could we bring the more complex surgical expertise
Mhm.
to the other partners we're working with and in the countries?
I think one of the wonderful things that you do in the organization is that you are training others in the
Yeah.
local market to do this on their own. And I think that's a lot of your point of difference versus other nonprofits that just go in and leave,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm. That's our huge, thank you for mentioning that, that is our major differentiator, is the commitment to building local capacity in the countries we serve.
Mhm,
So it's true that the organization started as with what one would think of as the classical trips, the trips to go conduct the surgeries. And I just want to presence that just 3 days ago, the founder of our organization, Dr. Donald Lau, passed away.
mm,
And after a very full and accomplished life, when he started the organization, it was to bring mission trips. And it was in the past, I would say, 10 plus years, and accelerated by COVID, of course, was this aha of, we, if we could train local surgeons and keep them trained on the latest state of the art practices from Stanford, from Johns Hopkins, Harvard, Northwestern, and so forth. If we're able to do that and they can train residents, surgical residents, in their respective hospitals and in their communities to do this, the impact is exponential. And
mhm.
if I may,
Yeah.
we also we're on a roll lately. There's a lot of releases of studies. Finished a multi-year study that actually quantifies as best as possible that potential impact, where for each, we call them a super trainer. So the head of our hub site in Nepal, for instance, Dr. Shankar Rai, or the head of our emerging hub in Uganda, Dr. Rosa Lenyo, just as two examples, Dr. Howe in Vietnam. If they take this on and begin to train locally and within their regions, we're looking at a 400,000 case impact.
Isn't that? Geez.
400,000. We know that over 5 billion people in the world, and the World Health Organization is saying it's now even higher, lack access to surgery. Like the things we just take for granted, 5 billion people do not have access to safe, affordable, quality surgery. Even if we take a small percentage of that and say, okay, 5% of that or 10% is reconstructive, the millions and millions of people who need the case. So if we
Yeah.
can build off that exponential impact, we feel that's where research can make the impact that we really are striving to achieve.
It's so amazing. I'm so glad you have those metrics to help people
Mhm.
understand really what the organization is doing. Now, you've been there about a year.
A year and 7 months.
Year and
Not that not that
7
I'm counting you, but year and 7 months.
But given your time there, what has moved you? What
Oh,
stories have touched your heart and that we could
oh,
share with our
it's
listeners?
well, it's an incredible organization, and I think what first the fact at how relatively small we are for the work that we do. We're
Mhm.
currently a budget of 5 million, which for a nonprofit is on the smaller side. But yet the in-kind, which is not in that number, the in-kind contribution of these unbelievably committed volunteers, the medical volunteers who give up vacation time to either go do the training as surgeons, to go as nurses, as anesthesiologists, physical therapists. So there's a team, it's called our surgical team. They're doing it on their own time.
Mhm.
They're going, and this is it's very moving. So I had my first trip last February to Nepal and Vietnam, and that was where, oh, I mean, when I think about what moves you, it was in that experience. And if I could just describe the way that a visit with a surgical team goes, this is the training teams. You always start with what's called clinic day, where all these patients who have been waiting for
Mhm.
who knows how long to be seen, to be potentially treated, they're waiting in these hallways and lobbies. And it's not like our hospitals. I mean, these are under-resourced settings. And they've come in many cases, have traveled multiple days, either on motorbike, on multiple buses, walking. They get there, and in the case of Vietnam, it was mostly children we were seeing because that trip was on the maxillofacial. And a lot of the children had what's called apart syndrome, where the skull fuses too early after birth. So the skull is supposed to grow with the child. When it fuses too soon, the growing brain has no place to go. So it creates a whole lot of very complicated challenges. The trip I was observing was the training trip to show in Hanoi the Vietnamese team how to do these surgeries and the tools that they need. So to see the parents, I think a moving was to see the mother turn over her child to our team.
Mm.
This little 1 year old who's about to have brain, basically skull surgery. That was the first surgery I observed. So the joke on the team was, oh, the new CEO should see a surgery. Maybe she'll see a cleft lip or something. No, it was
No.
skull brain surgery. Oh my gosh. Well, that's what it is. And I think to me the moving it was that this watching the parents
Yeah.
entrust their child. And the wonderful thing is I got to see the same child and the mother a few days later before we left town. And thankfully the surgery was a success and it was just so amazing. I mean, obviously it's something that has to be monitored and there are repeat surgeries needed, but that first phase was successful. The other moving part was piece was when we went from Vietnam to Nepal to one of ReSurge's very strong hub sites in Kathmandu, led by Dr. Shankar Rai. And when I was telling you about the burn contractures, the story that I'll never forget was this. I think he was about 25-year-old young man came in with his brother, and the 25-year-old they had driven on motorbike. I don't know how far. They were all
Mm.
covered in dust, and his hands had both been burned so badly they were contracted. And it was an accident. He worked in a garage, an
Mm.
industrial, like repairing engines and such, and there had been an explosion. His hands were damaged so badly he couldn't take care of himself. He couldn't work, and he just barely spoke on
Mhm.
his behalf. It was like he just was
Mhm.
there, and he's like, can the brother's trying to advocate for him, and he was one of the cases that was accepted to be worked on that week for him to be treated, and it was successful. And again, that's another one where the contractures, much can happen in progress quickly, but requiring multiple surgeries. But
Mhm.
that was an incredibly complex case. And to know that he's going to be able to go back to work, he's not going to be dependent on his brother, so his brother can live his life and go back to work. It's that it really is the multiplier effect. You
Mm.
could see it in that, like right there. In the
Yeah.
case of the baby in Vietnam, that child's going to be able to go on and go to school and have a full life, with the 25-year-old in Nepal knowing he can go back to work. His brother can. And so
Yeah.
it was very moving, yo.
Yeah.
It was so thank you for letting me talk about that.
Well, I mean, I'm moved too by listening to you, and I'm sure our listeners are. I can't imagine not being able to use your hands.
I I know it. If you really,
Think
if
about,
you even spend 10 minutes just thinking about that one thing.
yeah, so grateful for our use. So, one of my favorite programs, in addition to just your mission and everything you're doing, is the Powers program
Mm,
and what it's doing to really empower women.
yeah.
Oh, you got to talk about that one.
Okay. I know the powers. I feel you're asking me what inspires me earlier too about that. I love that we have such rich programs. And so the Powers program stands for the Pioneering Women in Reconstructive Surgery. And the program is now, I think, 7 years old. And it was done, this is a program in which the skincare company, SkinCeuticals, which is a L'Oreal company, SkinCeuticals approached ReSurge International about partnering in some capacity. They were looking for a real brand partnership. And the Pioneering Women in Reconstructive Surgery program came out of that. What that is it is a cohort program. It's a 2-year program in which 6 to 7 women are selected from the countries we serve. So whether it's in low and middle income countries in Southeast Asia, or for instance in Nepal, in Africa, and in Latin America, Central America, and the women are they're generalists, general surgeons who show an interest in reconstructive. And because in many countries there in many cases not a single reconstructive surgery, or it's some wild figure like 1 per million people, when you think about how much access we have to plastic and
Yes.
reconstructive surgery in the US. So the point was to help, number one, meet the need of, we need more reconstructive surgeons. Here's a way to develop young emerging surgeons, and also to address the gender gap, the huge gender gap in the medical profession. It's already challenging even in our own country. when you think about what women go through to make,
Mhm.
through the medical school experience and afterward, imagine in some of the countries we serve. But there's recent research coming out too that shows that the effect, the benefit of the women surgeons on their patients often exceeds the men for whatever reason that is. And that's something that we want to talk about because the recovery it takes from these surgeries. So the program where it's in a 2-year cohort, the women are not only provided actual training, they're providing leadership skills. So
Mhm.
I know anyone listening to this knows it's not just the subject matter knowledge you need, but how do you stand in your self-confidence? How do you handle those tough political, interpersonal situations? So the program does both. And it's incredible. I got to meet the Powers women in my first month at ReSurge at SkinCeuticals L'Oreal headquarters in New York, and it was so amazing, yo.
Yeah.
And their biggest thing was, yeah, how to navigate from a career perspective, how to stand in their power. And so we're now moving into our fourth cohort coming up, launching in our new fiscal year, which is in July. So we'll be inviting in our fourth cohort. So there's
Oh,
other aspects of the program like scholarships, but it is what you say it is. You see the videos on our website. We're going to be there'll be another video coming out. It is inspiring.
uh, so one of the things that I always like to encourage my listeners is to kind of celebrate their accomplishments. And recently, you have achieved a great accomplishment. And I think you want to tell our listeners a little bit about the
Oh,
International Leadership
great.
Association.
Oh
And
gosh, thank you, yo.
yeah,
I
do it.
Yes, I mean literally just even in as we were preparing for this podcast, I just found out that I have been appointed to the board of directors of the International Leadership Association
Woo-hoo.
effective in July. And the ILA, we like to call it, but for anyone, if you look up the International Leadership Association, what's awesome about it is that it is a forum for bringing together the latest research on leadership, emerging trends, and convening thought leaders in leadership and practitioners. But the part that makes it super special and really got me inspired to become, I've been involved with ILA now for 3 years, is that it's very much focused on a just and compassionate society and really looks at its impact, really measures and maps its impact against the United Nations development goals. So the focus on sustainability, that includes, by the way, medical outcomes. And so for me, I'm a passionate about the study of leadership and the exploration of leadership, and to be able to bring research, the work of research, which is around localization. I mean, the whole commitment to breaking the colonial patterns of flying in, flying out, for instance, but
Mhm.
instead really investing locally, making sure local decision makers are driving our priorities in those countries. That's an example of what the International Leadership Association might be talking about
Mhm.
and how we do that more. But it's fabulous. I'm thrilled. I'm so excited because
Yeah,
it brings together for me
congratulations.
all these interests that I have.
Yeah, and when we were talking, you referred to the notion of wisdom leader. And
Mm.
I just think that's so interesting. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Well, this is even going back to my consulting days,
Mhm.
very interested in how to really generate inspired leadership. And in my role at the Institute of Noetic Sciences, which studies very much the interconnected field, and also where is our inner knowing coming from, or where's our inner wisdom coming from. I started to see like how to look at, to be a wisdom leader, or to is where do you tap into your inner wisdom. So
Mm,
we were telling that story of how I was saying yes to those opportunities that
yes.
seemed to be coming my way. Well, for me, for me, it was listening to my inner wisdom. Everyone has a different interpretation. From it could be a religious interpretation, or spiritual, or it could even be scientific. I'm fascinated by that intersection of spirituality and science, and how does it apply to leadership?
Mm,
So how are you tuning in? And it, again, some people will call it all intuition too. But what are you picking up on in meetings or in one-on-ones? What is going on that could lead to breakthrough?
mm,
And I think that's, and what it means too is that it's not easy. It's sometimes the theory behind noetic leadership, and the noetic meaning this greater interconnected whole, the nous, and a Greek interpretation of that word, meaning your inner knowing, is it is of a good purpose.
mm,
And so, if you believe that what you're picking up on is of a good purpose, and you have to listen to it, and sometimes that's hard. Sometimes that
mm.
means changes or tackling a situation that's not easy. But often, when you call and you say, look, like in running a nonprofit, I say, well, I'm only doing this because I'm trying to help more people. So sometimes that's a way to say, may my may my inner wisdom,
Yeah.
may my guides, however you want to look at it, be there for me when I take this action or have a tough conversation. There's a lot more I could say on this, It's like
I
it's
I just got to say though, how lucky. Well, nothing is really luck. I mean, I always kind of look at it like it's the flow, and but to
mm,
have you in the position of leadership for the organization, oh my God, it is so
oh.
special. So not very many leaders I that I have ever worked with, except one, Mary,
Oh.
had perspective like
Mm,
this, and could lift people and
mm,
encourage people to find their inner selves, and to work with that. So I think that is a gift that you're bringing. So I thank you for that.
You're being generous. You're being very
Yeah.
generous, and
Oh,
it's
my pleasure.
if I may say this, I have run workshops on this, and I something I'm passionate about. I think it exists for a lot of people. It's that they're not comfortable bringing it out in their day-to-day leadership.
Yeah.
And that's often what comes out, is to say, "Oh, how can I do that?" So I mean, to be candid, when I arrived at ReSurge, I had to tone it down a little bit, like just, and I've been eking it out gradually, but it's in, just things like how we would organize a staff retreat. And I think people know, but you have to almost come out of the closet about it. It's like
Yeah, I get it. But it seems that the awareness of it, and it's attractive.
mm, oh, I
And so
like that.
you're drawn to it, and you want
Yes.
more of it. And so anyway,
Oh,
I
that's
feel
nice.
that.
Well, thank you. I wanted to be of service, and I'm thrilled that I have such support at ReSurge,
Yeah.
not just with the staff, but with the board, to pursue to to bring ReSurge out via these leadership channels. It's important.
Yeah.
And we're very fortunate to have our Chief Program Officer, Natalie Myers, who is very gifted and deeply experienced in global health. So we're both like coming at this about how do more people learn about this important work in the world. And if my angle of that is to also inspire people in their leadership, great. So that makes me happy.
Well, you
So
kind of
thank
led
you.
us to the next question, which would be, how can our listeners support ReSurge International?
Oh, thanks, Yo. I would first say we have fantastic marketing materials to just incredible, inspiring videos. Learn about us. Number
Mhm.
one, I would say please learn about us. Resurge.org, resurge, research.org. Learn about us. I think that's learn about us and be informed and spread the word. So we have
Mm.
incredible social media channels, but the videos, our chief marketing officer, Ana Santos, is just incredibly gifted.
She sure
And
is.
yeah, I mean, we're so fortunate. And
From Miss Marketing to
we have an
professional to
amazing
her,
team.
I say,
I
all
I
hail
know, I
Anna.
feel, and so to that, I'd say learn about us. Obviously, we are entirely funded by private dollars. We do not receive to date government funding. We're working on that. Unfortunately, surgery does not tend to be funded much in the world of global health. It's really interesting. Tends to be infectious diseases and such. But we are working on it, and we might have a breakthrough to support our local hubs. But yes, funding of any level is deeply appreciated. In kind. I mean, if this work speaks to you and you want to get involved in a capacity, it doesn't even have to be as a medical professional. You have helped us, right?
It's been a
So
real
as a
pleasure.
marketing, so see this, I think bringing expertise. I love the expression of time, treasure, and time, treasure, and ties, and talent. Yeah,
Yeah.
there's four of them, and
You know what we
yes.
forgot to talk about, and I don't want to go very far without talking about the strategy and the
Oh
exciting
gosh.
strategy you have coming up.
Oh man. Oh, yo. You know what's so funny? Well, it's because we're on such a roll. It's fun. We're in this conversation. I know it's a time. There's a lot of firsts. There's a lot of big happening right now at ReSurge. It's exciting. But one of the big things, which we just had our board meeting 2 days ago, is we will be unveiling our new strategic plan over the next couple of months. It'll take effect in our new fiscal year beginning July 1st. It is it is meant to be a breakthrough plan, and it really goes back to the study that I referenced that was led by our medical officer, Jim Chang, um, a former fellow to research, Dr. Lawrence Kai, and Natalie Myers as our chief program officer. That 400,000 impact figure, the way to activate it is we have got to strengthen our hub sites in the countries we serve.
Mhm.
So we are looking with the strategic plan to further Nepal. The Kathmandu site is currently our strongest site. Even that needs more supports. Then we will be in the middle of Vietnam in a city called Hue. We will be developing a hub there where we have an incredible humanitarian surgeon, Dr. Ho, who is committed. That's what it takes, Yo. It takes it has to be someone committed to serving the people. And so in each of these countries, and then in Uganda, I mentioned Dr. Rose Alenyo. We have Dr. Saif Nuru in Tanzania. We have a possible hub in Ethiopia around microsurgery. And then in potentially in Ecuador, where we're as a base for that region. So the strategic plan is around, strengthening our training,
Mm,
treatment, and sustaining our hubs.
mm.
That is how we're structured. And the only way we can activate that is by increasing awareness of research. So we're going to be doing a major public relations campaign. Oh, it's so exciting.
I know.
I wish I can't give it away yet. But we were very fortunate that the very well-known advertising agency Ogilvy took us on pro bono this past year. We have a public awareness campaign, and we will also be really looking for resources on both the individual giving level and institutional giving, that there is no reason why we should not have more financial support. The return on investment is so high, And we've got a supercharged board right now and a supercharged staff and passionate people in our community like yourself. So we kind of feel the time is now
Yeah.
to activate this. And thank you for bringing that up. I don't even want to say the name of the strategic plan because
Mhm.
it's giving away the public relations, our awareness
Mhm.
campaign, but it's going to be exciting. And I'll say we're going to launch it publicly at our gala in San Francisco on October 5th.
Okay. So, everybody, October 5th,
Yes.
mark your calendars. So, I think you've given our younger generations a lot of good advice throughout this episode. So, what maybe we can just skip to the last question I ask people that come on the show.
Mm.
What would you tell your 20 something self today?
Oh my gosh. Well, it's funny. Someone recently said to me, gee, it's too bad you weren't in this flow earlier in your career. In other words, I loved my career and it was awesome and it moved and it's been great. I wish I had been more confident
Mm,
earlier, and not in an arrogant way. But if I could go back and talk to myself, like I'll give an example, going to Harvard Business School, not an easy place. And I went in the mid 90s, and at that time, only I think 20% of the student body was female. It's definitely gone up, but it's a tough environment. You're graded based on how you debate in class primarily. And for me, I tended to be on the quieter side, believe it or not. I've come out of my shell since then, but I think that's what helped it. I used to get so stressed out, and a lot of us did in those classes. Every day you had to be on. You didn't know if you're going to get the cold call. But that I wish I could go back and say, enjoy, like
mm,
be, you're there, like just enjoy it. And by relaxing a little bit, you'll actually do better. And and so I would say that it's not an arrogance thing. It's about being comfortable in your own skin
mhm,
and knowing what's uniquely you and
mm,
saying, yeah, and so I think that would have maybe accelerated this flow, this ability to be in a full, like joyful pursuit of one's career.
mm.
It's not just a job. It's this interwoven life, which I think you could probably identify with, yourself. It's like we're not just doing this to earn a paycheck. It's like, no, it's our full expression in our life. So I
Yeah.
would love to have told myself that then.
Just relax.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess for me too, like it'll all unfold exactly as it
Mm.
should and when it should, that
Yeah.
there isn't a time. I used to think, oh, I've got to do this by this time,
Oh,
it
yeah.
was,
Yes.
just pushing myself really
Yes.
hard. Where if we just sort of lean back into it and have that confidence that you talked about, that it's all going to work out just fine and it's going to be exactly as it should. But I sure
Thank
didn't
you for
think that.
saying that. Yeah, I think it's something to, it's funny because it's a great question to reflect on for us. And also if someone's listening to this and they are, in the 20s, 30s,
Mhm.
is, yeah, to be in that trust. I always believe if you're putting the right intentions out, and I would say, yeah, to follow. Now, I what, yeah, to follow that intuition, that calling, but to maybe relax into it. So, yeah, it's a really good question.
Mm.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah,
Is there anything else you'd like to tell our listeners before we close today?
I think I would just say the thank you for being interested and to enjoy whatever you're learning about our organization, ReSurge International. That these are real lives being impacted every day, and I would just say, any support of any type, because each life that's changed, those couple examples I shared, imagine that
Mm,
multiplied by hundreds of thousands. I'd also say, let's continue this conversation on the leadership journey because it's an unfolding. And
yeah.
so I look forward to being able to talk again and also hear I love hearing people's perspective. So I would put an invitation out, that people to connect with me, with, on LinkedIn. We have really strong social media channels at ReSurge, but I really welcome feedback and ideas. And thank you
Wow.
for giving me this opportunity,
Well, thank you
Much
for joining
appreciated.
us.
Girls, take the
And
lead.
listeners, I'll have all the links in the show notes for you so that you can take Claire up on her offer, which I think is just so generous. Thank you for that. And thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you,
Be
listeners.
well. Thank you.
Thank you for listening today, and we sure hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, please leave a comment wherever you listen to your podcasts. Tell a friend about us. Join our public Facebook group, Girl Take the Lead, or visit our website, girltaketheleadpod.com. We also have a YouTube channel where your subscription would be appreciated. Once you're on YouTube, search at Girl Take the Lead. And we've recently expanded to YouTube Music, where you can find a video of this episode. Here are 3 takeaways from our episode with Claire. 1, a key point of difference for ReSurge International is their ability to strengthen surgical systems in low income countries and the multiplier effect that creates. 2, the POWERS program advances first generation women constructive surgeons in low income countries across the world. This program aims to tackle the gender gap in global surgery by providing surgical training, leadership development, and mentorship for women surgeons in those countries. 3, we can all be wisdom leaders by listening to our inner selves and our intuition. Our next episode will be a soundbite building on our episode today with Claire. She mentioned her passion for noetic sciences, and I didn't know anything about that. So, you know me, I had to go do some research on my own to learn more. And I think you'll be interested to learn more about the interplay between scientific knowledge and inner knowing. So good. So please join us again and talk to you soon. Bye.